Hello and welcome to Embracing Modern Virtualization, Insights from Portworx, Red Hat, and CDW. Today's webinar is sponsored by Portworx, by Pure Storage, by CDW, and by Red Hat, and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. So not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now next, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we are offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a blog on Portworx, Red Hat, OpenShift Virtualization, and KubeVirt, and a white paper on unifying VMs and containers. There are also some links in there labeled ATM, which stands for Actual Tech Media. One of those is the ATM Decisions Group. That's a panel of IT decision makers. You can apply to join that to participate in some more in-depth events and other opportunities. Also, there's a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of more upcoming events like this one. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section as well. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find a link with the details there. All right, with all those housekeeping details out of the way, let's get to this fantastic session. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters. We have Andy Gower, who's head of partner marketing for Portworx. We have Peter Lauterbach, who's in cloud platforms product management at Red Hat. And we've got Jeremy Wise, a solutions architect at CDW. So I'm going to turn things over to Andy, who's going to lead this great discussion.
Joining today's webinar, Embracing Modern Virtualization, Insights from Portworx, Red Hat, and CDW. My name is Andy Gower, and I'm really excited to dive into this topic today with Jeremy and Peter. So let's go ahead and get in to this. Let's talk about the agenda for today. We're going to do a quick round of intros. Then we're going to spend about 20 minutes talking about modern virtualization, trends, things we're seeing, things to talk about, things you should be considering. And then I'm going to let Jeremy show a little bit about the actual solution, things that people should be actually looking for and thinking about as they build into the future. And then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So that, let me turn it over to Peter to introduce yourself. And thanks for joining today.
Hi, I'm Peter Lauterbach. I'm one of the OpenShift product managers here at Red Hat. I've actually been in the high-tech enterprise IT space for some time now. I've worked for enterprise storage companies, database, doing a lot of performance and scale engineering, did a little bit of hyperconverged, and now I'm here at Red Hat. I originally came here focused on traditional virtualization technologies, and now I am focused on modern virtualization with OpenShift virtualization.
And Jeremy, welcome and introduce yourself if you would, please.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Andy. I'm Jeremy Wise. I'm with CDW. I've got 20-some years in data center system designs, HPC, AI, big data. And then moved over to help on the application modernization and the DevOps ecosystem about 4 years ago, and do a lot of work with Red Hat and building solutions.
Perfect. And I'll be your host today, Andy Gower. I lead our partner and solutions marketing here at Portworx. And before joining Portworx, I spent about 5 years working on Kubernetes technologies at both IBM and Red Hat. So really excited to talk about this next frontier with modern virtualization. So let's dive in. And I want to start with a question for you, Peter. When we think about modern virtualization, let's level set with the typical customer scenario. Who are we engaging? What are their roles? What are the challenges they're facing?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very wide spectrum, right? So many of some of the customers I talk to are very large enterprises, large global, but 80% of the customers are actually a much smaller scale, right? So they're running their businesses on their virtual infrastructure. They've got your standard 3-tier applications, right? Web server, middleware, database. And they're probably using some sort of modern, storage technology that has storage replication, and gives them, the business continuity and data protection things that they need. But basically, it's that virtualization platform is running all of their technology from IT apps to all the things that run the business. Jeremy could probably give more details about the types of things that he sees.
You're spot on. And I think this is really important because a lot of the options that are being considered, a lot of the technologies that people are saying, what is the future? And I want to plan for that, have to start with a foundational understanding of what is the customer using today. And like you described, they have storage investment, the storage is doing the replication, the business continuity for that data, the ability for their data to pass compliance for that business continuity and maintain availability of the data is the foundation. Backing into that, we can then understand and then design something to replace it or give alternative technologies. But you have to start with the foundation. Yeah.
And you mentioned today's foundation. When we think about where customers are and we'll call it their modernization journey, Peter, can you talk a little bit about where this conversation fits within that journey for a typical customer and how this is different from maybe the app modernization journey or fits within that app modernization journey people have been on?
Yeah, and thank you for teasing that out, because modernization is a word that can get interpreted multiple different ways. Most people think of application modernization, right? Which is hey, I take this monolith and I break it into containers. That's only one aspect, right? And we're going to separate and segregate that right now. What Jeremy and I will be talking about is infrastructure modernization, right? Which is, you've got a set of technology today, a pattern that's probably been stamped out 10 or 15 years, but you actually want to skate to where the puck is going, right? A lot of the things that we learned in building cloud infrastructure in terms of elasticity, robustness, and scalability are things that you can actually run on-prem today, right? And using products like Portworx, you can certainly do that. So this idea of, I want to modernize and do infrastructure as code, I want a more declarative infrastructure, is really something that's important in how you do your operations.
We're reducing a lot of the churn, but like you said, building a modern framework that you can grow with. Cloud is a pattern, not a location then.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask you, Jeremy, is this something when you talk to customers and when you think about the modernization journeys they're on, is this a frame they're already thinking in, or is this something that we need to tell our customers about how to think about it in this type of modernization framework as opposed to the modernization framework they have in their head today?
Yeah, so I'm speaking to most customers. Obviously, there are some customers who are ahead of the curve and already have the teams or the investments in it, or are, because of the nature of their market segment, they're already moving forward on that journey. Most customers, though, are at the beginning. They're either or recently have been forced into an evaluation of this whole modern framework, and trying to rationalize it, trying to figure out the operating model they'll have to move to this. And so they're at that beginning of the journey, and they're working through, and they're looking for a Sherpa to kind of come alongside them. They're looking for an opinionated stack so they don't have to take on all of the technical debt of a new ecosystem and not really learning or knowing all of the ins and outs of it. They want somebody to come alongside them and to kind of guide them and provide an opinionated stack, and as well as provide the support. So when they run into problems, that they can pick up the phone and have somebody like Red Hat and Portworx help them out.
So you mentioned, they're starting to evaluate options or looking for guidance on those different options. On the Portworx and Pure side, we've identified really 4 options that exist out there today, 4 swim lanes, we'll call it. Staying with the current provider, switching your virtualization providers, maybe moving to the cloud, or today's conversation, which is modernize VM to Kubernetes. In your role, Jeremy, I know you've evaluated all of these. Talk a little bit about these different options and what you see as the positives and negatives of each of these 4.
Yeah, and we understand that there are customers that are, because of the timelines to make the decision or move, because of the market they have or the budget, they have to be very, very tactical. That's how I approach it. Like, the conversation has to be very much about just simple, this is the timeline. I don't have time to do a bunch of that. But a lot of our customers are better suited, have a better strategy, if they can step back a little bit and evaluate what is the best for them. Because it may be a matter of switching to a different provider for hosting the virtual machine workloads. It may be a matter of moving some of the workloads to a cloud. Most customers, it ends up in a mix. It's going to be a mix of these workloads, especially in the timeline that we have to use them and make a decision on them, leads them where they are. But we've rationalized why that is. We've gone through the numbers. We've not just guessed. We've actually put through the specs. We've also looked at, well, what is the modern data center going to look like? We don't want to just move out of the frying pan into the fire. We want to move to a framework that's cloud operating model or platform engineering based. That's the new marketing term, so to speak, which talks to the framework where we can grow and handle modern applications. And the other thing is, a lot of these applications are, again, moving to the cloud, and cloud is a pattern. And so, what used to be a COTS apps last year has now become a modernized app provided by the OEM vendor. So, but rationalizing this and then making a decision based off of what is the best for each of those apps within the customer, and then knowing why you kind of pick that solution approach.
And I know you often, Jeremy, like to kind of talk about the term of, I want to pick a horse that can make it to the finish line. Yeah. Talk a little bit more about that. And I think it's a good analogy to think about when you're looking at these different options.
Yeah. So in the last 4 months, I've really seen a massive influx of conversations about what are we going to do with this new kind of rationalization. And, I look at this as I've been around when we went through the transition from bare metal into virtualization. We're at that inflection point now where we've kind of come back full circle and we've reset, and now we're going through this rationalization. And what you need to understand is there are lots of options out there, and everybody's going to put their best foot forward. Great. We're okay with that. But you got to make sure that in the analogy of a horse race, you pick a horse and get on it, but you also made a decision why you picked that horse and not the others. You understood the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the technology. Nobody can say they meet all the features of every horse. They're all not all the same. And so you have to kind of rationalize why you picked it, run through it so that you can defend, well, this is the one I got onto. But before you start that race, you need to understand what the end line is. If the end line, in the case of virtualization, of switching to virtualization providers, is it has to handle replication. It has to handle it synchronously or asynchronously. It needs to do this amount of I/O a second, or these kind of number of virtual machines, or you need to kind of define the acceptance criteria up front, because a lot of what I'm seeing is people throw something out there, they get on a horse, it looks good, it sounds like it's going to do great, it has maybe the initial hard costs, but then they start getting into the soft costs, they start realizing maybe the technology doesn't hit, and the horse dies before it gets to the finish line. And people are spending a lot of money, and when you're talking about timelines to make this transition, they may have lost the critical timelines they need to be successful. So my suggestion to most customers is take the time, rationalize through, pick a horse, find out why that horse can or can't make it to the finish line. And then against that, maybe get off the horse and pick a different one. But walk with an MVP and a Sherpa through the conversations and get the good, the bad, and the ugly for each of your alternative technologies.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think you make a great point here. Right. So all the rules that we've used to architect distributed systems, for the longest time, of blast radius, RPO, and RTO, those actually don't go away when you're using a product like OpenShift. In fact, they become more important because they're part of your declarative infrastructure. So I like your recommendation of don't focus on the implementation details of what you have today. Make sure you understand the business and service that you're delivering and what are the requirements that the business needs. And if that can be met on a different platform, then your problem is solved.
So I want to pick up on the horse that I've circled here to carry your analogy forward, Jeremy, which is modernizing VMs with KubeVirt. And I want to start with you, Peter. And let's go a step deeper and talk about what exactly is it that Red Hat's delivering today. Talk a little bit about what is KubeVirt and why is it so important to those that maybe don't know a lot about what KubeVirt has changed for those in the Kubernetes community.
So KubeVirt is actually, as you know, everything we do at Red Hat is open source, and there's an upstream project available that anybody can use. So OpenShift is our opinionated Kubernetes distribution, and KubeVirt is the capability to run virtual machines on top of that. Right? So Linux virtualization is a solved problem, right? We solved it with KVM about 15 years ago. It's the infrastructure and technology that powers virtualization on every Red Hat platform. That's Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Red Hat Virtualization, Red Hat OpenStack, and now OpenShift. And it's also in use by the vast majority of hyperscalers. What we as a platform innovation company have done is taken Kubernetes, where generally in the past, just a Kubernetes cluster would show up somewhere that somebody else is managing, and you would put your workloads on it. But, how do you manage the bare metal, right? So we actually took some of the technology we already had that was powering OpenStack, called Ironic, and that's now metal cubed in OpenShift. Right. The same with networking. Right. So OVN, which is a very good software defined network, that actually powers OVN Kubernetes, which is the default networking inside of OpenShift. So we took that same technology, KVM, wrapped KubeVirt around it, and that's the way you declaratively manage virtual machines in OpenShift. And the virtual machines are first-class objects. Right. So you say, go create me a VM that's this size, or go create me a VM based on this template or based on this instance type. It's RHEL and Microsoft Windows, right? So it's the same operating systems you're using today, and then you have golden images based on. And then we interface, those virtual machines interface with the rest of the cluster and the workers through either a CNI for networking or a CSI for storage, right? So Portworx is one of our certified OpenShift storage providers. You can use others if you already have a legacy investment there. But if you use Portworx, the virtual machines work natively with that infrastructure.
And I'd be remiss to not take the opportunity to kind of double click on that Portworx component and echoing what you said, Peter. Portworx is really built to connect into OpenShift and provide that data and storage layer. And originally for containers, now for VMs. So as you move on to OpenShift, just like your application layer where you can run containers and VMs side by side, now the data and storage is handled seamlessly for both of those types of applications. And whether that's DR, whether that's the persistent storage itself, whether that's the scaling of the storage and the data, the movement of the storage and data, the migration of the storage and data, Portworx is that layer that lets you now treat VMs and containers the same within OpenShift from a data perspective. So you get a stack that really lets you have some flexibility, some portability, and bring that modern application development to both the containers and the VMs side by side. So
exactly. And there's one more point I'd like to make here, which is one of the ways to reduce your risk is actually reuse some of the technologies you have today, right? So since you're running Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Microsoft Windows as guests, right? That's the same operations. So anything you're doing inside the guest, any guest agents you may have, say Splunk or Elastic, anything that you do with automation, right? Whether that's Ansible, PowerShell, Chef, Puppet, all of that technology will still work with the guests that you run on your traditional virtual platform or OpenShift.
And I think that consistency is key, right? It lets you have what you know and what you're used to from a framework now live in that modern world. So now you can run those applications, you can bring those development practices into a more modern structure and take advantage of the benefits of OpenShift without necessarily having to give up the things that you're used to.
Exactly.
So Jeremy, I as someone who's in the field implementing this type of solution, talk to me a little bit about the art of the possible and what you see as being the output of this kind of solution and what a customer can see into the future with this kind of solution. And it may be as just part of a journey through modernization and kind of taking them through this in a different or better way than they had before.
Yeah, I mean, many customers, this is the transition that's happened with Broadcom has just become an accelerator. Whether you like it or not, or whether you didn't want to participate or not, it's just a simple accelerator. And the reality of this is the state we're in. In that context, this can be the point where you have an inflection time and also some driving reason to adopt these new these new frameworks, these new approaches to doing compute in your data center, and do it not only more efficiently, but also in positioning yourself towards a new modern applications, more cloud-like computing. And so, like you said, I kind of liken this to a journey. Nobody's going to do this monolithically. We realize that there are going to be some applications that just simply are better to stay. Some that need to just go to the public cloud because it doesn't make cost-effective sense to continue to maintain them the way they are. But then there are many, many apps that you either just need to do like what Peter said, in the continuing model of how we support them today. Can I just simply move to the new framework move me closer into a platform computing space and use that foundation to host things as they exist and as they need to continue to exist, both in the aspect of productivity, administration, and things like data and data continuity, such as the lifecycle data, managing it, data recovery, data backup, all of the availability of the data. Leave that and build me a framework that's equivalency or very close to what I have today, and then let that stay there. And while that stays there in that state where I continue to use that, I can walk through that journey of as those applications move to modern frameworks by the vendors themselves are pushed into, now here's a deployment in OpenShift as an operator of our app. Great. Now I get all of those advantages of that cloud-like operating model and the decoupling of the application from like a traditional 3-tier stack with its self-healing and automation and self-deployment and auto upgrades and such. So all of that kind of is through that journey. So some applications, once you lift and shift them, they may be refactored. Some of them will move to cloud native in the aspect of how they're deployed. Some will transition to another architecture and platform technology. All of those are a framework that, again, we kind of walk through this architecture design we just talked about and said with OpenShift and the Portworx replication and the stack with KubeVirt technology based on the KVM architecture that's proven in the industry, and using your existing hardware and knowledge and storage and infrastructure design, can we architect that to walk through a journey and use the resources you have, and then allow you to retool your operations and security and all of those people towards that modern framework. So we try to speak through it as a journey and use the resources that you bring to bear to make it a transition that's cost effective.
Yeah, and if I can talk a little bit, Andy, if I may, just talk a little bit about an example of a mutual customer of ours that is going through this journey, right? And so they're actually in stage 2 here, where they're replatforming their virtual machines from their old platform to the new. We have tooling for that, right? So the migration toolkit for virtualization will allow you to inspect your inventory, crack open a virtual machine and bring it over as is, bring the data into Portworx, and then you can actually, when you take a maintenance window, you can actually shut down the virtual machine on your original platform, bring the last bit of data back up on the new infrastructure, right, with minimal changes, right? And that's something that they're doing they started with technical workstations, right? But then you can get into more sophisticated workloads like Java middleware. There's a lot of that out there. And then databases as well, right? As long as you have a performant enough storage subsystem, like you do with Portworx, you can actually run your databases directly in a virtual machine on OpenShift.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And what I really like about this visual here is that is one customer. We have other customers who are coming at this from a different stage in this journey. And what we've opened up with KubeVirt and OpenShift is the ability to go through this journey from different stages and coming in at different places. We may have customers today who are already on the cloud native journey. They're all the way in. They're creating that new cloud native. They've built out on OpenShift. And then they're looking back and saying, oh, now I can just take that VM that I wasn't quite sure what to do with, lift it and shift it and rehost it onto OpenShift. And now I've got a clean operations model for my team to manage those VMs and containers side by side, which is in complete contrast to the example you just gave, which is, hey, I have a VM today and I'm thinking about moving it to cloud native in 3, 5, 7 years, but I need to go on a journey where first I lift it and shift it, and then I think about plotting out how I decompose it. So I think the beauty of this stack is it lets you attack this journey from different places and do it at your own pace. You don't have to commit to a, rip and replace and a wholesale move from traditional to modern in one switchover in one weekend in 1 week. And I think that's the power of what this journey now looks like with modern virtualization. So I want to go to one more topic before I turn it over to Jeremy to do a little show and tell, and that's some key areas to consider. And we talked a little bit about some of these throughout the conversation, but I'll start with you, Jeremy. As customers think about and consider their options, not just KubeVirt, but really going back to those 4 different options we talked about, what are some of the things they should be asking or thinking about or jotting down as they start to rationalize which of these approaches makes the most sense?
Yeah, and this slide really is a coalescing of over the conversations of dozens of customers. The goal is to, again, we're using the horse analogy, to get on the correct horse. And it may not be the perfect horse at the end, but at least you've rationalized through and you've at least understood, if I'm going to have to write a check, I can rationalize why it's for this solution approach and versus alternatives, so that I can, go forward knowing that I just didn't randomly pick something that I may end up regretting, that there is a method I work through on it. So the one I start off with the front is, how much was the increase of the cost in licensing? Because there's a point where it's simply better, and we just call out and make a recommendation, adjust your budget if at all possible, but you're going to end up being better all over to just simply pay what you have, because it's not going to be a good ROI. Many customers, I would say the majority of our customers, they're over that threshold. That's why we're having this conversation, because they wasn't just a 50% increase. So we're, with that in mind, we have to help them because they may not be able to write the check. We also appreciate the fact of we have to give them something that has a good rationalization, both hard costs and soft costs like retooling and re-educating and changing the way they're handling data, and all of those things, those take some soft cost things. And we try to give some projection, but we walk along with the customer, that conversational discussion. Strategy versus tactical, like, can we talk about your apps and your goals? Do you already have major chunks of your data center that are either already modernized apps or applications that are going to be refactored? We have a huge development team, or we have no development team. We need to understand what your resources are in that approach, whether you're going to be tactical or the timeline forces you to be more tactical than strategic. We really like to see customers have a little bit more time so we can be strategic, so they walk through that journey about what their goals are. Again, current applications, understand your data. It's really about what is the business continuity, what are the plans, what are the expectations of those applications as they exist today. Because if we don't talk to that, we don't understand what those data needs are, you're not going to be a happy customer, and the customer's not going to have a happy migration. We've had some really large customers go through that whole strategy session and get to the end and realize they've lost massive business continuity architecture. And that is a complete fail for them on their audits. So we really try to speak through existing apps, maybe even within a subset of apps through an MVP, and then talk about your budget and your organization. Again, how do we map to what you need here? Because a lot of our customers, it will take them a quarter or two they've got the design, they've got the horse. Jeremy, we agree that's the horse to go with. But we still going to need a quarter or two to get the budgets together. So what can we do between now and then to get us ready? There's some Red Hat education, some MVPs we can offer for some hands-on workshops just to get them some of the fundamentals so they can start to understand what that horse looks like, and figure out what that modernization strategy is for those customers who are, again, more mature and working towards that architecture. So.
Yeah, Jeremy, and I think you've got a great point here, right? Which is, and this is the reality most customers are dealing with, which is their entire IT infrastructure is locked into one vendor. They've been handed a massive, increase, and they're trying to, solve this multivariate calculus equation. What's the right technology for that? Now here's the important part. The two things I would recommend is, one, it's not always about the technology. You also have to consider, and you talk about it here, what are the organizational impacts, right? Are you actually going to need to form different types of teams There absolutely will need to be upskilling and training. Your teams already have muscle memory on the old platform. How do you get that on the new platform? And then lastly, just be incremental about it, right? Which is get demonstrated, I think you call it an MVP, get demonstrated ability with a small set of apps and a small set of hosts, and then you can grow from there. You can always scale up. But if you start with, let's buy a data center full of stuff and try to do, OpenShift and Portworx, that's just going to end in tears.
Well, or the other side of it, which is we start off with, we're just going to try, a vanilla version of Kubernetes and just throw some apps into it and just try to get it to work. But they're missing the bones to make it high available, make the compliance for availability in architecture. So you need to kind of have an MVP approach to it that says, these are foundational components to a cluster design. And without those, this is not business critical for hosting business critical apps. So what are the fundamentals from that? And having somebody help you design that. So,
and Jeremy, you walked me right into that. I know you have put, and CDW has put a lot of thought into how they can help customers do that. So they're not on this journey by themselves. So I want to give you about 5 to 7 minutes to show what that actually looks like and how we take these considerations and make them reality on paper for a customer. So I'll stop my share. I'll let you share your screen here.
Okay. Appreciate that. And I'll try to make this quick. I'm not going to try to make it all detailed and a lot of nerd. We can do that on, give me a call and we're glad to go through that. I'm just going to talk through the fact of CDW in relationship with Red Hat. And there are other vendors out there that are doing Kuber, but this bundle we put together has a strong opinion because it's ready for mission critical. It's ready for high availability. It's ready to host your business. Has those wrappers around it so that you're not painting yourself into a corner or the horse is not going to get it to the finish line, to use the Chervil analogy again. So when we deploy this, we deploy it with an opinionated approach with a reference design that 90% of the people will end up needing as the foundations. Things like when we deploy the clusters, we do everything through code. We don't come into a customer and do a click-through install and do a whole bunch of magic, and then with the magic people left and the operations and security and developers are like, we don't know what they did. It's just magic black box. You cannot afford that. That's literally jumping out of the frying pan into flaming fires and not a good place. But you need to make sure that when somebody comes in and helps you with this journey, they're leaving you with the infrastructure, the deployment structure, understanding how to rationalize and redeploy, repair and remediate. And you should be doing that as part of your deployment cycle. You need to build that muscle memory, just like back before VMware. You had to build that muscle memory of how we do things. Things like redeploy with ACM, because you need ACM for doing virtual machines, but also ACM is the cluster management, the Argo framework that also allows the developers to be more efficient for application modernization. And also ACM is, again, Argo in pieces to do the virtual machine migration and do cluster management. And so you're dealing with this framework that allows you to then manage multiple clusters. So again, this is just a cluster mission, and then you have all of the other modules in here. One of the key parts of Red Hat is the concept of operators. You don't have to micromanage every little component and its subcomponents when you do upgrades or continual improvements of technologies. These are all built into the deployment. So when we deploy the cluster, the entire framework is deployed out. And so I'm just kind of showing through all these operators we build into the opinionated stack because they're all core components to be able to make this successful. And obviously that's using the Pure Storage ecosystem. And the goal is that when we deploy this, again, we're doing this all through code. So here's an example workflow of, I have an image that has all of this data here. It compiles the state of that environment, and it keeps the archive bits of what that deployment was. So I can always look back at it and redeploy it, or destroy it and redeploy it again, or tear it down or validate the state of it. So those workflows are the health state, the validation, the tear down, the rebuild. All of that should just be, it's all in code. And if we need to change something or upgrade stuff, we can do that and redeploy it. There's no angst about that type of workflow of managing the systems. So in speaking to that, I like pictures, I like diagrams, and there's this cool little plugin. So VS Code, again, we do everything through code. And I know this is intimidating for some people who are used to GUIs and click-throughs. And this is a transition that we help people with, which is you can use Red Hat in the GUI and the click-through and use the operational workflow to do all of those tasks. But more and more of the lens that we're working through is towards platform operations, which is through code, deploying things with patterns so that they're repeatable, so that we can reiterate them faster and build them faster. And again, this is kind of the diagram of an MVP, which is, we have 4 nodes we peel out. This is going to require bare metal. If you're doing anything with OpenShift virtualization, virtual machines hosted is not going to cut this. You're going to be using bare metal because of licensing costs and because the speed and because of it. So our opinion is minimum MVP, 4 nodes, 2 sites, it's 8 servers, peel them out of your existing, make sure they're Red Hat compliant, Red Hat 9, and let's use that to ignite your first kind of cluster. This is the production grade variant of it and simply goes toward the operating model of modern computing. You deploy apps to dev. You test them and validate them. You promote them to production. Great. But you need to have a business continuity plan for the data, be it Postgres with replication or Microsoft SQL with log shipping or whatever it is. And so you need some kind of DR strategy. So there's a 3 cluster minimum CDW approach. When we sell you a bill of material, services, and the licensing for Red Hat and Portworx, this is the MVP we ignite. So that you understand what is the end goal. Now, this is the ignition structure. Then we go back to your apps team and to your virtual machines list, and we say, add up all the CPU, and we just take the base foundation clusters of 3, and we license up all of the additional vCP you need, check. Now you see all of the hard costs for you to make the move to this transition to the number of virtual machines, the number of modern apps, the number of containers you need to move, etc. We add that to the foundation of this 3 clusters. Now you have your hard costs. Then we talk through the soft costs, like services. What's the cost to do this MVP deployment? Around $60K, somewhere around there. Why? Because we've done this all in code. We've done all of the deployments through automation so that you're literally just coming over here or when we deploy this thing, and you check what you want to set as variables, and you enable functions within the cluster. And the outcome is how many of those operators you want to deploy out there. And so this is what the state you end up with. And then, of course, I call out things like they're supporting infrastructure you need. Like you need RWX storage. You need to have other pieces of like how do you back up the environment? How you do the data replication volumes? All of those pieces are part of the conversation. Then we talk about things like security. Like when you used virtual machines and we moved them into this, great, you can still do that. But as you move to a more modern framework with containers, how do we give the visibility for the security team to monitor this? How do we take the logs out of the environment, such as the cluster in the deployment state, and externalize that to whatever infrastructure you have, Splunk or a Logic Monitor or whatever syslog, whatever you've got, so that you're not monitoring yourself with the shovel. All of that is part of our deployment opinionated stack, because that leaves you with a mission-critical hosted framework that has the data availability that maps to 80% of that migration type customer. Obviously, the sizing will vary. 4 nodes is a starter. You might need 20 nodes. You may need 4 and you're good enough. That's just a sizing discussion, but this is kind of the foundations to give you business critical framework to move forward with. And the last thing I'd like to call out is just that there are a lot of complexities to when you migrate virtual machines. So it's not just fire and forget. The whole other workflow we go through here is you have to, again, we do this all in code. How do you make the clusters high available? How do you link them together? How do you do a golden image, a new golden image based on the new KubeVirt configuration? Red Hat houses all these pre-configured Windows and Linux patterns. Great, let's teach you the new way to deploy those virtual machines using not a converted virtual machine, but a new modern pattern from the patterns that are out there pre-published and hosted by Red Hat through the machine tools. Yes, we can do migrations. We got that in our workflow, but also golden patterns, how do we go forward with that, right? And then you have the things of, you have to deal with how do the operations and data teams make sure that they understand the muscle memory, like Peter called up, the muscle memory for them to say, in a graceful shutdown, this is my workflow. In a hostile shutdown, things happen. Let's figure it out. These are the things we have to go through, and let's build that back into our business continuity plan. And we kind of walk a customer through that conversation. And we fully realize, by the way, that in the architecture, this is not a simple matrix. These are the matrix for how you deal with storage, and this is the matrix for how you deal with the deployment workflow. These are fairly long. This is why, again, we recommend a strong opinionated stack. Portworx, OpenShift, solid, foundational. Then those workflows that we talk through in the deployments here, and how we approach those conversations, how we make sure we do that all properly, that ends with your ability to talk through this kind of end state, which is equivalency to what you had as much as we can with the platform architectures. So that's it in summary. It's just, we have it in code, we provide the services, we wrap it together with a conversation, and we make sure we design this so the platform meets your MVP and then your applications.
And I think, Jeremy, you walked me right into our Q&A section, and I want to jump into kind of the first question that often comes up, which is, where do I get started? What are the next steps that I should take? How do I engage with the teams to really, take this to the next level? And Peter, I'll give you the floor to kick that one off.
Sure. It's interesting. As I said, Linux virtualization is a solved problem. And as Jeremy said, we use a lot of the technologies that have been around for a while, right? KVM, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which has SE Linux built into it. All those capabilities are available to you. You can read a lot of documentation and white papers and watch videos, but honestly, the best way to understand how to run virtual machines on OpenShift is to get hands-on with it, right? And there's multiple ways to do that, right? There's Red Hat classes that you can take. There are workshops that we have around the country in different geographies. Or you can just go to console.redhat.com and create a single node OpenShift and get a USB and do like I did. And I've got a 3-node cluster in my basement.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that just, as folks continue to, look at this journey and think about their options, of course, with CDW and Red Hat, we have put out a number of demos, this webinar, and we are planning, joint workshops later in this year that will involve the three of us. So there's a lot of great opportunity to engage both virtually and in person. And really, I think, Jeremy, it sounds like the best way to get started is to really start thinking through those key questions and start figuring out what it is that you actually want as your end goal. Because if you come in with just I need help, go, that's going to lead you to a horse maybe that you don't want to ride. You got to put a little thought into where you want to end up so you can design the right architecture, pick the right horse to get there.
Yeah, because there's a lot of good options out there and technologies. There's the cloud providers are bringing their clouds on-prem, and those are perfectly valid, guys. And there is a place where I tell customers, because of the way you're dealing with and the applications and workloads, it is really the most cost-effective. Or going to a very simple hypervisor. You don't need business continuity. You don't need replication. You don't need all of those pieces. So Hyper-V or KVM, those are the most cost-effective way to do that. But 80% of our customers, that unfortunately isn't the horse they can get on and be successful in. I can't move them to a single landing zone and push them in a public cloud landing zone and they meet business continuity requirements. That's a fail. So not only is it hard to get the ROI on cost, but then they fail their compliance requirements. So we really need to talk to, again, I start with the data. I really try to focus on what is the business requirements for that data? How can we help design to meet those needs? And not do an expectation of you got 5,000 apps, start at app 1 and refactor every one of them. That's not realistic. Like Peter said, there's a lot of those apps, either you have no chance of refactoring or they're just not cost effective. You don't want to you're not a development shop. You should, okay, great. Then let's not redevelop that. This one doesn't make sense. Wait, then leave it alone. Let's just move it and put it into a framework that can still treat it and host it to the RPOs you need for the data, but not go through the churn to refactor it because it's just not cost effective. So yeah, rationalize that, figure it out, and build it out.
Yeah, I think one of the other things with a trusted advisor like CDW, right? Both Red Hat and CDW offer assessment services where we can come in and help you through this guided conversation, right? Because it's not algorithmic in any way, like X, Y, Z spreadsheet. But you do need to put some thought around it that's not only technology based but business based.
Very much business based, yes.
The other question I just want to briefly touch on before we run out of time, something we often hear, something that comes up a lot is, okay, when I think, Kubernetes or OpenShift, my head goes to containerization and this is a scary journey because I'm not looking to containerize. Help me dispel that, Peter. Help me knock that one out of the park for those who have that fear that are listening today.
Yeah, as I said earlier, right, we're a platform innovation company. We've been delivering Red Hat Enterprise Linux for, I think it's over 25 years now. And this idea of we know how to manage systems at not individual systems, but systems at scale, right, across large geographies. The fact that it's running on a container platform like OpenShift, as we said, it gives you a lot of the declarative infrastructure, a lot of the things that make the cloud paradigm powerful. You absolutely can use on-prem, right? If you have whatever governance or business requirements, either financial or medical or regulatory for whatever reason, right? These things have to exist in your space and can't be accessible by other people. You can use a technology like OpenShift to do that and bring those workloads that you have today, right? Databases, middleware, web servers, standard IT applications, and bring those into OpenShift with minimal disruption. I'll let Jeremy actually talk about some of the cool stuff, though, that because I love that demo, by the way. That was awesome.
Yeah, Pete, I completely agree. There are a lot of customers and situations where they just need to deal with the technical, just re-platform. And we have that. We have through Kubernetes, with KubeVirt, with Red Hat, and the testing and support backing behind it, with Portworx handling the storage and handling things like parallel backups and recovery, and other vendors that are bringing to bear more and more features into the Kubernetes ecosystem. We're going to continue to groundswell all of those features that we've been used to for the last 20 years into this ecosystem. Now, we're at the beginning of that journey. We're in a point where I can say with confidence, I've tested it, I've kicked it down, I've seen it stead back up. It is capable of hosting business critical apps. More features are coming, more enhancements. But you can start that journey today and not churn through and refactor. Just take your virtual machines, chew through them, and re-platform them, and then step back. Get the budget back, get the funding back, retool some of my administrative, retool some of my security, and now let's talk about what are these apps going to do in the future? As more and more we see starting to go to modern apps, I'm ready. I've got the platform. I'm already in that journey, so to speak. I want to just automate what I have with infrastructure as code. Again, I'm ready. I've got a framework. I've got a foundation now. Now we can move forward with that journey, and we have a future for doing things like auto scale and auto heal and modernized applications as they're rolled out from the OEM vendors.
I think that's a perfect place to leave it for today. So, I want to thank Peter and Jeremy for joining today. And I want to just leave the audience here with a couple of next steps that we just mentioned. You can, of course, watch the demo. We have a number of demos on both the Portworx and Red Hat YouTube channels to showcase OpenShift virtualization and Portworx working hand in hand. Please attend an OpenShift virtualization workshop in person or virtually. Like I said, look out for one from Portworx and Red Hat and CDW in the near future. And bring in CDW and of course, Red Hat and Portworx to help conduct that assessment. Some key contacts here, Jeremy, Randy on the Red Hat side, and Justin on the Portworx side, who you can reach out to for any of these next steps. So I want to thank the panel again for joining today, and thank you for listening. And with that, I hope you have a great day, and we hope to catch you soon.
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks to Andy and Peter and Jeremy. That was a great presentation. Really good demos, really interesting information. So before we wrap up, we do have one more piece of business, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that $250 Amazon gift card today is Justin Lucazonis from New Mexico. So congratulations to Justin. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Portworx, CDW, and Red Hat for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.